I think it's noticeable that Jean Vanier, when he does theology, doesn't do what is these days called disability theology. He does theological anthropology. He moves from what people with learning disabilities have to say to the rest of us about what it means to be human. There's a book by Deborah Beth Creamer on the theology of disability, in which she protests against the binary, the disabled and the non-disabled or whatever. This binary, she says, is completely misleading because we're all on a spectrum. And actually, we need a theology of limit. We're all limited in different ways. And certainly one of my big theological journeys has been reflection on creatureliness. We are, after all, dependent at the beginning and end of our lives. We're all vulnerable and mortal. But if we are to welcome difference, to affirm the other, to embrace the stranger, we have to acknowledge first that there is a difference. If we were talking about racism, we would be saying being colorblind doesn't challenge racism. So when my son was a kid, we talked about mental handicap. Then, oh dear, that wasn't good language anymore. It became learning difficulties. And I said, hey, I'm a professor at the university and I have learning difficulties. So then it became learning disabilities, because if you don't name it, you don't get the services you need to support the situation. But naming is full of pitfalls because of labels, misuse, and offence. Now, why? It's partly, of course, our own self-centeredness, our sins and frailties, our difficulties with relationships, our failures. But we'll come back to that in a minute. There is something more here which I need to address. Jean Vanier asked me to write a paper on welcoming difference, and I began with a parable. Once I was driving Arthur through some lanes just outside our home city of Birmingham. At one point, we came round a corner to see a horse straining at the reins as the dismounted rider tried to steer it reluctantly along the road. I stopped the car and we waited. I assumed the horse was rearing up at the car or something. As they went past, the girl said, "She can't stand the Shetlands." It took me a moment to realise what she meant. Over the hedge in the field were several tiny little shaggy Shetland ponies. It seemed that the horse recognised they were the same but different, and so scary and threatening. Now, I think that is a very telling parable of how we are as human beings. We are not naturally inclined to welcome difference. There's something about the way we react to one another. We socialize with people who are the same. And throughout history, race, ethnicity, and other differences have generated reaction against people who are seen as alien, strange, different, yet the same. Now, there's a book by Mary Douglas, an anthropologist, called Purity and Danger, which I think helps a lot in her analysis. But I have to give you a health warning. The way it's put will make you feel uncomfortable, but her conclusion is positive and relevant. Every human culture, she says, makes these binary distinctions: in, out, light, darkness, life, death, black, white, clean, unclean. Dirt, impurity, or uncleanness, she says, implies a set of ordered relations and contravention of that order. Food on the table is fine, but food on the clothing is dirty, right? Dirt is matter out of place. Dirt is the byproduct of a systematic ordering and classification of matter. Individuals, as they grow up, are encultured into this ordered view of the world. For example, my mother used to tell me that my first words were pretty and dirty. That ordered system is inevitably challenged, however, by things that don't fit. The question is, how does a society cope with what is different? It may exclude, or it may try to interpret within the system, in other words, find a way of accommodating what doesn't fit. Or, she suggests, it may respond so as to generate something creative. She has a parable. The gardener tidies, orders, or purifies, cleanses the garden by taking out the weeds. If the weeds are burnt or thrown away, that's the end. But if the weeds are turned into compost, then used as a fertilizer and put back on the garden, they become life-giving. Human societies don't naturally welcome difference. Hunter-gatherer societies couldn't support anyone infirm or incapable, whether through age, injury, or disability. They had to find ways of reinterpretation to deal with the challenge. Modern societies have done something somewhat similar when they used the medical model as a way of justifying the exclusion of people with disabilities into subnormality hospitals. The early 20th century fascination with genetic purity reinforced that and led to the Nazi policy of cleansing society of people with defects, as well as those of what they thought the wrong ethnicity, like Jews and Gypsies. We may hope we've come a long way from that kind of thing, but read the news and it's never far away. Attitudes towards immigrants and asylum seekers in our society today. Mary Douglas suggests that the attempt to achieve that kind of purity prevents the creative from happening. The desire for purity, she suggests, is hard and dead. Purity is the enemy of change, and it's through welcoming difference that profound breakthroughs can occur, the life-giving compost. It's because humans can transcend natural reactions that they're more than naked apes. People who are different have the power to evangelize us. Welcoming difference enables transforming mutual relationship. Jean Vanier, you remember, told me that Mother Teresa spoke of repulsion, then compassion, then wonderment. These conflicting reactions have to be faced, but it is through that process that the fruits of the Spirit are germinated and harvested. Go back to 1 Corinthians 12, what we are embarrassed about or ashamed of and cover up is essential to the working of the body.